Your soulmate is about to confess they're married. But that's not the biggest secret. My beloved child. Your soulmate is about to tell you something they have been terrified to say out loud: they're married. But before your heart decides what that confession means, there is something you need to know. The marriage itself is not the secret that has been keeping them awake at night. There is another truth underneath it. One they have protected so carefully that even people closest to them don't know the full story. And now, for reasons they can no longer ignore, they have decided you deserve to hear everything. They have rehearsed the conversation more than once. They imagined your silence, your disappointment, the possibility that you might walk away before they could finish explaining. But something changed recently, and suddenly hiding the truth became more frightening than losing you. Don't skip, because the detail that pushed them toward this confession changes what this marriage actually means. For a long time, your soulmate convinced themselves that keeping quiet was somehow protecting you. They told themselves there would be a better moment, a safer moment, a moment when the truth wouldn't hurt quite so much. That moment never came. Instead, every interaction with you made the secret heavier. There were times they wanted to tell you everything, then stopped because one question kept haunting them: what if they never look at me the same way again? But recently, someone connected to the marriage forced a conversation your soulmate had been avoiding. It wasn't an argument about love. It was about something unresolved, something that should have been dealt with long before you entered the picture. That conversation made your soulmate realize the situation could no longer remain hidden. And strangely, when your name came up, their reaction revealed more than they intended. They didn't defend the marriage. They defended you. That was the moment another person in the room realized where your soulmate's heart had truly been leaning. But here is where the story becomes more complicated. Your soulmate isn't preparing to confess simply because they feel guilty about being married. They are preparing because the marriage carries a history you haven't been allowed to see yet. What appears simple from the outside is tied to an old decision, an obligation, and a promise made before your soulmate understood what that promise would eventually cost them. They know saying, "I'm married," could make you shut the door immediately, which is exactly why they are desperate for you to hear the sentence that comes after it. They have even decided there is one piece of evidence they may show you because words alone might sound impossible to believe. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because when you discover what has actually been happening behind that marriage, and why your soulmate suddenly refuses to keep protecting the secret, you may realize their biggest confession isn't about who they married at all. It's about what they secretly decided to do because of you. What your soulmate decided began with a document they never expected you would need to see. It wasn't a romantic letter, and it wasn't some dramatic message written in the middle of the night. It was something far more concrete, a record connected to the marriage itself, carrying a date that changes the timeline you thought you understood. Your soulmate has kept it hidden because showing it means admitting just how long they have been quietly trying to untangle their life. The decision didn't begin yesterday. It began before some of their most meaningful moments with you, when they finally admitted to themselves that staying trapped inside an old promise was hurting everyone involved. But they hesitated to tell you because they feared it would look as though they were changing their life only to win you. The truth is more complicated. You may have awakened something in them, but the cracks in that marriage existed long before your heart became involved. And there is another detail they desperately want you to understand. The person they married already knows something has changed. Not every detail. Not everything about you. But enough to recognize that your soulmate is no longer willing to pretend the relationship is what it once appeared to be. During that recent conversation, one question was finally asked directly: is there someone else your heart keeps returning to? Your soulmate could have denied it. They could have protected themselves with another half-truth. Instead, they went completely silent. And sometimes silence answers what words are too afraid to confess. That silence shifted the entire room. Suddenly, the marriage was no longer being discussed as something permanent and unquestionable. It became a conversation about why two people had continued holding onto something that had emotionally changed long ago. Then your soulmate heard a sentence they never expected from the person sitting across from them: if you know where your heart belongs, stop making everyone live inside your fear. Those words followed your soulmate home. They sat alone afterward, staring at the proof they had been keeping hidden, and finally understood that telling you only half the truth would be another form of deception. So when they come to you, they don't intend to simply confess, "I'm married." They intend to explain what happened inside that marriage, what decision has already been set in motion, and why your presence forced them to confront a truth they had avoided for far too long. But before you assume the biggest secret is that they're preparing to leave, there is one more layer. Something happened before the marriage ever took place, something involving a choice your soulmate believed they could never reverse. And buried inside that old choice is the real reason they stayed when their heart was already telling them to go. The shocking part? Someone else knows exactly what happened, and that person has finally decided they will no longer keep your soulmate's secret. The person who finally refused to stay silent was there before the marriage ever happened. They remember your soulmate in those final days before the ceremony. Restless, uncertain, trying desperately to convince themselves that following through was the responsible choice. What nobody understood was that your soulmate had already considered walking away. They had even prepared to do it. But then something happened within the family that changed the pressure surrounding that decision, and your soulmate was asked to honor a promise they had made during an emotionally difficult time. They believed breaking that promise would hurt people who depended on them, so they buried their hesitation and went forward with the marriage. For years, they told themselves responsibility would eventually become happiness. But the person who witnessed everything remembers one chilling detail. On the night before the wedding, your soulmate quietly admitted, "I'm afraid I'm choosing the life everyone needs from me instead of the life I actually want." And now that witness is prepared to confirm it. But there's something even your soulmate didn't expect this person to reveal. They kept something from that period, a message your soulmate wrote but never sent. It wasn't addressed to their spouse. It was written during the moment they were questioning whether they could continue pretending their heart was settled. Your soulmate had almost forgotten it existed until the witness mentioned it during their recent conversation. Suddenly, the room went still. Because that message contains words that sound painfully familiar to what your soulmate has been feeling around you now. It describes the kind of connection they once hoped they would someday experience, someone who made honesty feel safer than pretending, someone whose presence made them question every compromise they had accepted. Your soulmate never knew who that person would be when those words were written. But after meeting you, they began remembering that unsent message, and realizing why it mattered. That realization is why their coming confession has become so urgent. Your soulmate knows they cannot place the weight of their choices on you, and they don't want you believing you are responsible for repairing their life. The decision they are making has to belong to them. Still, they can no longer deny what knowing you exposed. They had spent years confusing obligation with love and silence with loyalty. Now they are preparing to show you the document, explain the promise, and admit what has already changed behind closed doors. But there is one thing they haven't decided how to tell you yet. Because after the witness revealed that old unsent message, your soulmate went searching through everything they had kept from that chapter of their life, and discovered something else hidden with it. Something bearing your soulmate's handwriting. Something dated years earlier. And when they read the final line, they realized the secret behind their marriage was far bigger than even they had remembered. That final handwritten line stopped your soulmate cold, because it wasn't about the person they eventually married. It was a promise to themselves: if I ever find the kind of love that makes me feel completely honest, I won't hide from it. They had written those words during the same uncertain period before the wedding, then buried them with everything else they were afraid to confront. Reading them now felt almost cruel. For years, they had done exactly what they promised themselves they wouldn't do. They had hidden behind responsibility, appearances, and the fear of disappointing other people. Then you entered their life, and suddenly that forgotten sentence had a face attached to it. But something else was tucked behind the page, a second note in someone else's handwriting. Your soulmate recognized it immediately. It came from the person they married, and what it said proved that the doubt surrounding this marriage had never belonged to your soulmate alone. The note revealed that their spouse had sensed the truth before the ceremony. There had been hesitation on both sides, but neither person had possessed the courage to stop what everyone around them expected to happen. They entered the marriage hoping commitment would create feelings that uncertainty had failed to produce. For a while, they tried. They built routines. They smiled when people were watching. They avoided questions that might expose how emotionally distant things had become. But the note contained one sentence your soulmate had never seen before: if one of us someday finds what we were trying to force between us, we have to be brave enough to let the other go. Suddenly, the recent conversation made sense. That was why their spouse hadn't reacted with the anger your soulmate expected when your name became impossible to avoid. They had remembered the same truth. And now your soulmate understood that the marriage had been held together not by some great hidden romance, but by two people terrified of admitting they had made the wrong choice. Still, your soulmate knows none of this automatically earns them a place in your life. That is the part weighing on them most heavily. They don't want to arrive with documents and old notes expecting you to erase the fact that they kept something enormous from you. They know you may feel betrayed. You may ask why they didn't trust you sooner. And they have finally prepared an answer that doesn't make excuses. They were afraid that once you knew they were married, you would leave before hearing anything else. But now they would rather risk losing you with the full truth than keep you through another silence. Don't skip what comes next, because there is still one secret they haven't confessed to anyone, not their spouse, not the witness, not even the family that influenced the marriage. Your soulmate has already made a private decision about you. And when you hear exactly what they are planning to say when they finally stand in front of you, you'll understand why this confession could change far more than their marriage. Your soulmate's private decision is not to ask you to wait for them. That may be the last thing you expected, but it matters. They have decided they will not place you in the shadows while they straighten out a life they should have confronted long ago. No secret meetings. No promises that force you to put your future on hold. When they finally stand in front of you, they plan to tell you the truth and then give you something they have been afraid to give anyone for years, the freedom to choose without pressure. They have even rehearsed the words, "Should have told you sooner. I'm married, and whatever you decide after hearing everything, I will respect it." But there is another sentence they keep struggling to say. Because admitting the marriage is difficult. Admitting what they have already done about it is harder. Yet admitting why they did it is the confession that could change everything between you. Days ago, your soulmate quietly took a step that made their situation real in a way conversations never had. They began formally separating the parts of their life that had remained tangled together out of habit and fear. They didn't announce it. They didn't use your name as justification. In fact, when someone asked whether this decision was because of that other person, your soulmate immediately said no. They explained that you didn't create the unhappiness, you simply made it impossible for them to keep pretending they couldn't feel the difference between surviving a relationship and genuinely choosing one. That distinction matters to them. They want to come toward you as someone who has taken responsibility for their own choices, not as someone asking you to rescue them. And during that conversation, their spouse surprised them again by asking one simple question: if there were no consequences, would you choose them? Your soulmate didn't need time to think. Their answer came so quickly that even they were shaken by it. They said yes. But that still isn't the biggest secret. Because afterward, alone with everything finally becoming real, your soulmate admitted something they had never allowed themselves to put into words. Their feelings for you did not begin when they first became obvious. They began earlier, during a moment between you that probably seemed completely ordinary from your side. A conversation. A look. One small act of understanding you may barely remember. Your soulmate remembers every detail because that was the first moment they felt something they had been missing for years. They felt seen without having to perform. From that day forward, they started comparing every forced smile in their marriage with how effortless honesty felt around you. And now they are preparing to tell you exactly which moment changed them. But there is one disturbing reason they waited so long to admit it. Someone noticed their feelings for you almost immediately, and quietly tried to make sure you never discovered the truth. The person who noticed wasn't a stranger watching from a distance. It was someone close enough to recognize the smallest change in your soulmate, the way their attention sharpened when your name appeared, the unusual softness in their voice after speaking with you, the sudden discomfort whenever the marriage was described as perfectly happy. At first, this person said nothing. Then they began asking careful questions. Does your spouse know about this connection? Are you sure you understand what you're feeling? Your soulmate became defensive because they still hadn't admitted the truth to themselves. But instead of allowing that truth to unfold naturally, this person decided they knew what was best. They discouraged your soulmate from reaching out. They suggested that telling you anything would only destroy lives. And eventually, they delivered the warning that frightened your soulmate into silence. If you learned about the marriage, you would never believe their feelings had been genuine. For a while, your soulmate believed that warning. Every time they considered telling you, they imagined you looking back at every meaningful moment and questioning whether any of it had been real. So they created distance exactly when they wanted closeness. They became quieter when they wanted to explain. They may even have seemed confusing or emotionally inconsistent, because they were fighting themselves every time you were near. But recently, your soulmate discovered that this person had done more than offer advice. A message intended to clarify something with you had never reached you. Your soulmate had written it during one of those moments when silence became unbearable, then trusted the wrong person with information about their intention to send it. Somehow, fear and interference stopped that message before it could change anything. When your soulmate learned what happened, they weren't simply angry. They were devastated by one question: how different would everything be if you had received the truth when they first tried to give it to you? That discovery destroyed the final excuse for staying silent. Your soulmate now understands that other people have influenced too many decisions already: the marriage, the years of pretending, and even the distance between you. This time, nobody else gets to speak for them. They intend to tell you themselves that they are married, explain what is changing, admit when their feelings for you truly began, and take responsibility for every moment they allowed fear to win. But before they approach you, they are trying to recover that interrupted message because it contains something they never recreated afterward. Don't skip what comes next. The message was written before their current decision, before the recent confrontation, before they knew any secret would be exposed. That makes the words inside it impossible to dismiss as something invented at the last minute. And there is one sentence near the bottom your soulmate is almost afraid to let you read, because it reveals exactly what they were prepared to sacrifice long before they knew whether you would ever choose them back. That sentence was painfully simple. Even if you never choose me, I can't keep living a life built around what everyone else expects. Your soulmate had written it before any separation was discussed, before their spouse acknowledged the truth, and before anyone promised them that following their heart would lead somewhere better. That is why recovering the message affected them so deeply. It proved their decision was never supposed to be a bargain for your love. They were already reaching the point where pretending had become unbearable. But the message contained another confession they had almost forgotten writing. They admitted that one ordinary moment with you had changed something inside them, the moment you listened without judging when they revealed a small vulnerability everyone else usually dismissed. You didn't try to fix them. You simply understood. Your soulmate walked away from that conversation realizing how unfamiliar emotional safety had become. And from then on, they were frightened not because they felt something for you, but because those feelings exposed everything missing from the life they had accepted. Yet recovering the message created a new problem. Your soulmate discovered that someone else had read part of it before it disappeared. The person who interfered knew far more than they ever admitted, including the fact that your soulmate was already questioning the marriage long before recent events. When confronted, that person finally confessed why they stepped in. They believed keeping the marriage intact would protect the